Welcome to another great edition of Ask the Expert on Contingent Workforce Strategies LinkedIn group. I'm Jeff Nugent, and I'm really excited about today. The topic is optimizing your on-demand talent. And we're bringing a pioneer to you today in the discussion, Sean Ring, who has an amazing background from being within the employer of record compliance space to then, really being a pioneer in helping organize the on-demand staffing platforms in a very tangible, digestible way for large enterprise programs, to now taking that knowledge and experience from the Fulcrum days to working on optimizing on-demand talent within People 2.0 for large enterprise clients. So Sean, amazing to have you. Thank you so much for joining me today on this discussion. It's a great topic.
Jeff, couldn't agree more. Thank you. The feeling's mutual. I'm always excited to talk about this stuff, and even more so when it's a guy like you who, we've been chopping it up on the conference circuit for years and talking about ways to innovate in this space. And
on optimizing your on-demand talent, it's never been a more hot topic than today. There's the tech layoffs that are happening that are pushing talent to the online platforms. The pandemic, we had the pandemic that really proved the remote work model. So, people are trying to figure it out because, quite honestly, the talent is looking to work on demand as much as companies are looking for this very flexible working arrangement with their talent. So, can you elaborate on this just unstoppable macro trend that is really pushing the rise of on-demand talent?
yeah, I think so. I'll get into the trends in just a sec, but I want to start with just how do we look at how do we define on-demand
Yeah.
talent? I think one of the easiest ways to do that, Jeff, is to start with a lot of things that we see as end consumers in our day-to-day lives. And really, we've kind of evolved into this on-demand society. So generally, when you think about on demand, you're talking about the ability to access goods or services at any time and as needed. So most of the time, that's in the context of tech enabled services like streaming media on Netflix or any of the other million streaming platforms, ride hailing for Lyft and Uber, etc., food delivery, grocery delivery apps, people using their phone and technological advances to order and then receive a product or service immediately or within a very short time frame. But then also, um, it's it's not just speed, but it's also you can have something only as long as you want it. So at your request and not accorded to a predetermined schedule, like a 40-hour work week or something like that. So not only does on demand mean fast, but it also means you can have as much or as little of you need whenever you want it, right? And so when we take that and we translate that to the world of talent, it's obvious why there's a big rise here, and it's obvious why this is a very challenging thing to take hold in, especially large enterprise that traditionally hasn't had, let's say, the infrastructure or the operating model to allow easy adoption of that thing there. But on demand is ultimately just about how can we have access to talent faster and also utilize it only as needed.
Yeah, for sure. That makes total sense. So talking about the macro trends that
Yeah,
have been, bubbling over the last few years and really accelerated the thoughts and proven out the business model around on-demand talent as well.
yeah, no question. And I often refer to these as unstoppable trends. Like there is nothing, the cat is out of the bag on these. The world is moving this way. So it's up to us to recognize these things and then adapt, evolve, and innovate to where the puck is going. In the legend Gretzky's, famous quote that We need to skate where that puck is going. And so how do we do that, right? But it's important to acknowledge what those trends are. And I think if we look at the big macro structural global workforce trends, they all foster or point towards mobility. One of the big ones is specialization. Over the years, specialization in all aspects of work make it much more important what a worker does and less where or for whom the work is performed. Simultaneously, the character of work itself has changed from career based, what many, and I even heard this term the other day, Jeff, of, still hear people talk about perm placements, this thought of a permanent job is like just doesn't exist in today's world. So we've moved the character of work has changed from career based, really long term commitments to much more on demand deployment arrangements, and those work for both sides. So you touched on, that works well for a lot of the talent these days, as much as it does for the organization who's getting something on demand versus a fixed cost. And you see, average tenure for employees over a 50-year period plummeting to now being in the range of like between 3 and 4 years, maybe, depending on the age segment or job types. There's some nuance there, but also you see a lot of contract or contingent roles becoming longer. So we're like the 2 points are converging to at some point now it's really we're not going to need to define, there will be no difference. It's just work and
Yeah,
talent and
if
how
you
we
find a good
organize that.
consultant, a lot of the times, although you use them when you need them, but the length of engagements, you back to back to back to back a bunch of requirements or needs that then you're working with them in a longer period of time, right? And it's
Exactly.
not unlike your favorite vendor, right? Your favorite vendor, you end up working and have a long-term working relationship. Bring them in when you need them, don't use them when you don't, right? And
Yep.
so when you think about that in the contents of talent, the talent becomes the vendors, right?
Exactly right.
And those specialized skill sets of the talent are brought in when they're needed and then let go when they're not needed. It's not a negative connotation. It's just the way the work is getting done these days, right?
Yeah, and that's not a zero-sum thing. I mean, that's mutually beneficial to both parties in many, many cases. So you're right, it's not a bad thing.
So when we're looking at an organization that is thinking about this, of course, it always comes back to the business case, right? And why should we spend resources and thought and time on this as we go forward? So, looking at the business case, what are some of the benefits that organizations that you've worked with in the past, what are they saying are the benefits of having an on-demand strategy and really putting in the infrastructure to optimize that?
I think the kind of widely accepted benefits around all of this is the first one is agility. I think we've heard business leaders talking about agility for decades, but if you go talk to people in any of the Fortune 500 and, a manager and ask them like, how does that show up in your day to day? Very few would actually say that they feel like their company is agile. So it helps move the needle just to adopt this and start having some increased agility. Of course, speed when you have requirements. I think annual and multi-year planning cycles in a lot of ways these days with the pace of change are kind of irrelevant, and things happen so fast that you need to react equally as fast. So being able to fulfill resourcing requirements that you didn't even know you needed incredibly quickly in order to get a project over the line. It's efficiency, it's cost savings, it's access to specialized skills because a lot of these networks
Yeah.
have really strict vertical specializations, and it's being able to access and tap into those specialized skills that you don't have within your organization, or those that are there don't have the capacity. And
Yeah.
then ultimately, too, with technology, Jeff, it's about enablement of a borderless talent acquisition strategy.
So when you think about on-demand talent, and in your experience in kind of pioneering the aggregation of on-demand talent platforms from different kind of skill sets to geographies to ways of, different types of categories of workers, be it, light industrial to professional to accounting to IT to, across the board, and bringing that together and starting to organize that for organizations and large enterprise clients. What are some of the learnings you've had and some of the case studies you can kind of talk to, and some of the best practices and learnings of how to do this, right? And some takeaways for the group.
So the how part, I always think that the hardest part is just getting started. And I think you got a lot of people who are just kind of on the sidelines looking at like, is this really a thing? Is it not? Like, that doesn't seem like it fits. And my advice to anyone who sees the same trends that we're talking about and can see where the world both is now and potentially, where it's going to be, is just get started. What's possible. I think, a lot of the audience on here, because oftentimes we do talk about these things and there's not a whole lot tangible. So let me give you a specific use case that I think is pretty powerful, specific to HR. We had a customer, a large Fortune 500 CPG, beverage company, right? And their CHRO was needing to report to the board of directors quarterly about DE&I hiring metrics. And the amount of people that it took to aggregate this data and put it together and help her get prepared to go deliver the board was very, this was a high priority. Let me put it that way. This is a very high priority. The CHRO needed to be able to be confident in the data and the readout on a quarterly basis. And they just didn't have the data there, and it was really clunky and manual. So they said, hey, we need to have a Tableau developer come and build us a dashboard. And this is in the HR org. They don't have, Tableau developers sitting around on their bench necessarily. So they go to their StaffAug program. They have a $80 an hour rate card, I think, for this role. They're striking out. They can't find anybody, but they've cleared budget for a 3 to 6 month full-time role, 50 grand, I guess, under that rate card, approximately, if they were to find that person and it were to go that duration. They pushed that demand to on demand at Fulcrum at the time, where we had numerous marketplaces that would be curated and then shortlisted down, and they could compare across marketplaces. They found a gentleman, coincidentally, who lived in Canada, and he is a Tableau expert. One of the beautiful things that I think about the talent platforms is the talent always sets their own rate. So this gentleman is, hey, my hourly rate is $120 an hour. This is 50% more than what they've budgeted for. But he says, here's some examples of portfolio work. And I think I can do, after an intake or a calibration call, he says, I think I could do this probably in about 40 hours total. And so they select this guy. He's got his own Tableau instance on his computer. He doesn't need system access for the customer. He's up and running very quickly. And in 38 total hours, he delivers this project. And the CHRO has a beautiful dashboard that she can just, whip up a report right before, an hour before that board meeting, knows it's accurate. And that cost them $5,000. But in some ways, we're stuck in these ways of thinking about hourly rates as a measurement of, in this case, they paid 50% more per hour to save $45,000 out of 50, right? So they save 90% and they get the work done in 3 weeks. It was 38 hours build, but over a 3-week period to delivery with some iteration. And so instead of 3 to 6 months, you've got an important piece of work done in 3 weeks and for 90% less than you would have spent through a traditional StaffAug program. So
it's amazing. Well, Sean, I've said it before, we could talk a long time on this, and I have a feeling we'll have a part 2 at some time in the future. But thanks so much for joining me today. It's been a fascinating conversation on optimizing your on-demand talent.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Great to see you, bud. Take care.
Bye.